And hi everybody, you're very welcome to today's webinar. So I hope you enjoy it, hope you get a lot out of it. We've got literally hundreds of people dialed into the call today, so I hope you find it productive. So off we go. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rowan. I'm the president of Hayes Specialist Recruitment here in Canada. I've been with Hayes a long time now, my whole career. I've been with the company 22 years. I think I probably just say over 20 from now on. 10 of those have been based here in Toronto, so I'm very familiar with the Canadian marketplace. I would say today we're probably going to spend about, I think I can get through the content in about 30 minutes, and then we can have some time at the end for questions, which usually we do get some good questions. So we'll see how that goes. And as Caitlin said, just type them into the chat function, and then when we get to the end, we'll get through as many of them as we can. So if you know, when inspiration hits, ask the question, don't wait until the end, and then we'll try and pick it up when we get there. And that is that. So for those of you who remember from the first webinar that we did on this topic, which was 6 months ago now, you won't need an explanation, but I think it's probably the right thing to do just to kind of remind everybody of what we're trying to do here. So we do an annual survey every year, which I think is happening right now actually, as part of our own annual salary guide, which will be out in the next couple of months. And we always, as part of that salary guide, ask questions about recruitment and retention, just to see what people, you know, what they're experiencing and what trends there are in the industry. And we've noticed that for the last 5 years, every year, employers always say that fit is the #1 reason that a person doesn't work out. And that surpasses things like compensation and career progression, which are obviously very important. And then you add into that that when we talk to clients every day and we're talking to them about a new vacancy that they might have, we usually say to them, well, what happened? Like, how come the vacancy has come up? And if it's because somebody left, the reason for that, it must be 7 or 8 times out of 10 was they say, well, he just wasn't really a fit for our organization. And you hear similar comments from candidates too. Like, candidate will say, well, you know, I worked there, but didn't really work out. Why was that? Well, I just didn't really feel it was a fit. And we thought, because it gets referred to so often, that we should try and get to the bottom of what does this actually mean? Like, could we simplify it and make it something easy to understand? And ultimately, could we find out how we could help employers and candidates just make better hiring decisions and better career decisions because they had a better understanding of fit and how to assess it? So we said, let's give this a go. So we created and carried out a very comprehensive survey. We had 2,500 people responded, 1,250, so exactly half of those people identified themselves as people managers and therefore hiring managers, and the rest, I suppose, were just like people or people who are like professionals, I suppose, would be a good definition of it. For those who would ask the question, it's very much a cross-section of Canadian working life, so people were ranging in age from 20 to 60 years old. We covered 16 different industry sectors, covered 10 provinces, and then 20 functional areas within organizations. So, for example, HR, the accounting department, procurement, etc. Small to medium to large organizations, and people completing the surveys classified themselves as being junior level all the way up to C-level execs. So we've taken all the results, analyzed them, we've explained them, and then we've turned them into 3 different reports. And they are part 1, which is all about fit and recruitment, part 2, which is what today's about, fit and satisfaction, and then part 3 is about fit and values, and that's about the impact of people and culture on your own kind of desired corporate fit. So we published part 1 in April about fit and recruitment. So I do want to just remind you of what that was, because it does give some context for today. And that was all about how when we're hiring, or when you're hiring, people always focus on skills and experience, and although we talk about fit, there's very little done about ensuring or assessing that there's going to be a good fit. And then when it doesn't work out, it's because the fit was poor. And then when people are moving jobs, they tend to focus on salary progression and career progression, but they do very little to assess fit. And when that doesn't work out, it's very often because there was a poor fit. So on both sides of the equation, the person who's hiring and the person who's being hired, you know, the candidate, everybody seems to undervalue fit before the deal is done, and then they tend to regret it afterwards if things don't work out. So that was really a summary of what we discovered in part 1. Today we're launching part 2, and that's obviously what the webinar is all about. So today we're going to look at whether people are happy at work or not. We're going to look at how happiness impacts retention. We're going to look at who and what contributes to workplace happiness or satisfaction. And finally, what the road to happiness looks like for some people and what it could look like for you. And if you want to request a copy of part 1 or part 2 now that it's out, I will just show you how to do that at the end. So that's the prize for making it to the end, that we tell you how to request a copy. Okay, so I'll start out, as is traditional for our webinars, with the key findings first of all. So just going through these are really the headlines from the survey. So number 1, employers have a significant retention risk because only half of the working population say that they're happy in their current role. Number 2, there's a direct correlation between workplace fit and workplace satisfaction or happiness. 3, the people who work, or the people you work with, impact workplace satisfaction, but it's the direct manager that has the biggest influence of all. Number 4, professionals seem to undervalue happiness in their decision-making process. And then finally, those at the senior management level would seem to be the largest population with a defined fit, i.e. they know what they want, and they're also the group that seems to be the happiest. Okay, so I'll start out with a kind of a cover-all statement or question here for you, saying, are your staff happy? And you might assume, looking around the office, yes, they appear to be. They come in every day, everybody has a chat. I'm not aware of anybody who's looking right now, but does that really answer whether they're happy or not? So I'll look at the overall results here. So I'm going to start this, as a reminder, this is the Canadian professional population. So let's start out with if people feel as though they fit in at their current job or their current organization or team. So 2/3 say that they feel they do not fit in with their current working team, which is a surprisingly high number, I thought. And then you've got roughly the same number also feel as if they don't fit in with their organization's defined fit. So the immediate team and then also the whole organization. And I think this is really something to kind of note about an organization's corporate fit. So if you said that like a company's defined fit or their corporate fit is what the senior leadership want for, say, the overall tone or the culture of the company, say that's the definition of it, if you're an employer or a hiring manager within an organization, you really do, I believe, need to understand the differences between what you want for or what the organization wants for the culture versus the culture within your own team. So what I mean by that is, if I looked at Hayes as an example, so we're a company, and if we looked at our corporate fit or culture for Hayes, which we have, but then we have to recognize that within Hayes we've got different populations. So we've obviously got a sales team, for example, and we've got a very clear office culture that we want for our sales team. But if our finance director, he's hiring, he's got to obviously understand that the payroll team has got a very different working culture. Obviously, so what he's looking for in terms of fit is different to the sales managers. And so the corporate definition of fit doesn't really fit everything. And sometimes I've got to say, I wonder what the point of corporate fit is at all. But there's more about that when we get to part 3 in the series. So, okay, so moving on. Despite Canadian professionals not feeling as though they fit in, they do actually recognize the importance of fit when it comes to achieving their own career success. So 86% said that having a defined fit, so in other words, knowing what you're looking for in terms of an organization or a team to make it that you feel like you're at home and you feel comfortable, 86% of people said that they believe that having a defined fit is essential to achieving their own career goals. But then at the same time, the majority of the working population don't feel as though they fit in, which I think is an interesting thing. And that leads us to ask the next question, which is, do you as an individual know what your ideal fit actually is? And 65% said that they either don't know or they only somewhat know. And that leaves only 34% saying that they can confidently say, yes, I really do know what my defined fit is. So if you summarize all of that, if the majority of us don't know what our ideal working fit is, you could say it's not that surprising that so many of us are working in organizations or in teams that aren't a fit. So we understand we need to fit in to achieve success, but we don't seem to have a clear picture of what our preferred fit actually is. So it's a conundrum. Looking at the total sample size, the results of the survey suggest that just over half of Canada's working population are happy in their current role. So the other half, or 47%, just under half, are unhappy or indifferent. So it doesn't mean that everybody's actively unhappy, but there's a large proportion that are also indifferent about their current role. And I think you could kind of dismiss that and say, well, yeah, that's not surprising because it's work, like work is work, and people would rather not work if they could. And I've got to say, I know what you mean sometimes, but the point is, as an employer, I think that's a useful statistic to be aware of, that there's a significant proportion of your own workforce that are probably not feeling connected to their work, and that has to present a significant retention risk, so it's a good thing to know. On a slightly happier or more positive angle, we just said we'd look at who are the happiest people in Canada. So if I start off with province, it would appear the people in Quebec, there's a higher proportion of people who are happy, at almost 70% saying that they are. And then sad to say, I'm based in Toronto, the least happy or least highest proportion of happiness is in Ontario, with only 50% saying there are people saying that they're happy. If I look at industry, it looks like the best place to be would be within the public sector. So 60% of people saying that they're happy there, closely followed by people who work in the natural resources sector, which I was kind of surprised about given that there's been such a downturn. But it's funny, oil and gas and mining and resources always seem to come out quite high on the happiness quotient, and I'm not entirely sure why. The population with the smallest proportion saying they're happy is in retail. Sorry to say, if you're in retail, at less than 40%. And then finally, if we look at profession, the happiest people are in procurement at almost 80%, so an extremely high incidence of happiness there. And the least happy, again, very sorry to say, are actually office admin workers. So I'm sorry about that. So I suppose if you're a procurement professional working for the government in Quebec, then you're probably extremely happy. You're in a good spot. Or if you're not happy, then there's something wrong. Okay, next question, why do people leave? So if you have unhappy people, obviously, as an employer, then that could lead to turnover, and we know that that's very difficult to deal with. So we wanted to look into the factors as to why a person leaves, which could help improve satisfaction. So a couple of statistics. Almost 2/3 of employers say that they have a tough time retaining talent, and that makes sense. Now, good people are hard to find. The good people know that, and there's obviously competition out there amongst companies, so not hugely surprising there. We asked employers, what are the reasons for retention challenges they experience? And career progression came out on top, but that's actually come out on top for quite a while now, followed by competition from other employers, and then salary levels. And I think you could almost group all three of those into just the competition that you get from a good person saying, well, I've got a better offer, as the candidate would probably say. And all of this, what I've just said there, really lines up with what candidates are saying, because when candidates are deciding whether they need to take or whether they're going to take another job or not, compensation is actually the most important element of their decision, followed by the description of the role. And if you just look at that, what do we call it now, infographic on the top right, this was from a survey that we did previously called What People Want, and it says, when you're faced with a job offer, how do you weight the different elements of your decision? And the one that gets the highest weighting at 29.82% of the decision, that have a total 100, comes in at its compensation is the thing that influenced the most, and the second most influential thing is job description. So that kind of balances up with what the client was saying. So based on that, there would appear to be a match, and you could say that if you can sort out your career progression, your career path, if you can make sure you've got a succession plan, if you can pay at the upper end of salaries, then in theory you've got nothing to worry about and you'll retain your staff. I would say maybe, and the reason I say that, I'll try and explain it here. So when you're talking about people leaving and then talking about people taking an offer from another company, I always think that there's two distinct things that are happening there. Number one is the decision to leave where they are. I don't want to be here anymore, I want to leave. But then a whole separate decision is, the decision to take the specific offer that they've received. So, like, they've got to decide on where is it that they're actually going to go and why did they decide to take that offer or go to that organization. And it's an important point because why someone chooses to take a new role is actually very, very different to why somebody leaves an organization. And just to kind of illustrate that point, so we asked employers how to make a decision to let somebody go. And the biggest factor in the decision is personality fit, which you can see on the diagram we've got on the screen there. More common, actually, than the reason being the skill set of the person, which is kind of funny. You think about it. It's more common that somebody gets let go because of personality fit than their actual skill set. 55% of employers said that their turnover in the previous year was down to poor fit, and that outweighs compensation as a reason. So you could be saying, hang on a second, I'm getting confused now. So it's an interesting thing. When we asked about retention and what was the key, we say, well, it's money and career progression. But when we asked to think about the leavers, people who have left your organization in the last year, we say, oh, that was because of fit. And then we asked candidates the same question. How do they make a decision to leave an employer? They say it's because of the fit with the manager or the team. When leaving, people say the fit is the #1 motivator. So again, it's interesting. If we ask candidates, how do you decide whether you're going to take a job? They say, well, it's all about salary and opportunity. But what made you leave? Oh, that's easy. It was my boss. So final point on this slide, people know that fit is important, not just today, but when you're thinking about long-term career goals. And we asked how important having a clearly defined fit is to achieving your career goals, and 80% of professionals said it's important to very important. So it's an interesting thing. There's real quandaries and conundrums going on. Okay, so why is there this kind of discrepancy? Why are we saying our retention challenges and decisions to take new roles comes down to comp and the opportunity, but the reason for people leaving is all about fit? Why are employers not attributing fit factors more when they're assessing people and trying to improve their retention rate? A good way, I think, of trying to imagine this or get it clear in your own mind is to think in terms of push versus pull factors. I think quite naturally we're pulled to things like money and progression. It's an attractive thing. I could get a 10% increase here. I could get a 20% increase here if I move organizations. I could get a more senior job title. I could have a bigger team. And they're factors that are going to make us say yes to a role, and that kind of makes sense. So employers need to offer attractive packages to get a good candidate. That's a fact. And a candidate typically won't take a job for less money, actually, I would say as well. But if the offer is right, then they are very tempted. However, that isn't what makes them leave. We're typically pushed to look elsewhere if we're unhappy. So a happy person in a role typically doesn't look at other options because they're happy. But push factors such as fit, you know, the impact or the relationship that they've got with their manager, with the leadership of the company, or their work colleagues, or just say like the culture itself, if there's a mismatch in any of those things, it causes the person to be unhappy, and that could effectively push them to look elsewhere. So hopefully that's a useful way of looking at things. So what do we do? What do we do about this? Well, let's deal with the kind of fundamentals first of all. #1, as we've already said, compensation is absolutely important, and you cannot hope to pay significantly under the market rate and hope that you can survive. 2, career progression is absolutely important. We ask people about their own career aspirations. People want to progress. Like 45% see themselves as making it to senior management level, and another 30% of aspirations to making it to the C level or the president. So 75% of people say, yeah, I definitely want career progression. So it's fair to say that people are motivated by money, and also people are definitely aspiring for senior level roles. So let's say that's a given. But there are other factors that are critical that employers really have to look at. So the first one, #1, as we just said, if someone is thinking of leaving, it's because of fit, typically with their manager or with colleagues. But #2, people put a significant weight of importance have on their overall satisfaction. So think about how your team interacts, how they communicate, how they work together. They put a real weight of importance on the fact that they know that people will impact their own overall satisfaction. and it's the people that you work with will dictate whether you're happy or not. We have here that 80% of respondents say that their team are important to very important when it comes to their workplace satisfaction. The other interesting point on the graph to the bottom left, I'm going to kind of come back to this in a minute, so I won't spend too long on it, but the other interesting thing, I think, is there that as you look at a person's career progressing from junior level to director level, or say executive level, the more senior you get, the more you have the people, you feel that the people around you influence your workplace happiness, which I think they do, but I'm going to come back to that in a moment and kind of explain it more clearly. Okay, so we've established then the people, colleagues, leadership, management, they all impact fit. And as we just saw, 80% say their team are very important to the feeling that they fit in. And slightly more say that their manager, 82%, say that their manager is very important to that feeling of whether you fit in. Fit directly relates to turnover as well. If we look at responses from employers, almost 56% say that fit was the main reason for turnover in the last year, which we already said. And what's more, almost a third of candidates say that they've been let go because they were not a good fit with their team or manager. So obviously overall it's having a big impact on voluntary turnover, but also involuntary, probably the stuff you don't want. And then finally, the number one contributor to people not feeling as though they fit in, I think it's obvious at this stage, was saying that it was a result of an issue that they had with their direct manager. Okay, final kind of key message here today. We wanted to see how people's perspective changes as they progress through their career. So do we do a better job at finding our fit as we get more experience? And if we could people who are at an earlier stage of their career kind of learn from the lessons that people who have gone before them have learned? So we're going to look here at how seniority has an effect on the level of satisfaction that you have at work, and it would appear that seniority does actually have an effect. So over the next few slides, we're going to look at how fit, team, happiness all kind of tie in together. So as you can see on this graph, the more senior level, say senior management to executive level, say that they have defined their ideal workplace fit. So in other words, they feel that they're really clear about what they really want. So for example, the kind of people you want to work with, the kind of atmosphere, values, culture, and it would appear from this that more senior people are clearer about this than people who are earlier in their careers. And I would suspect personally, this is because they've had more time in the workforce to see what actually works for them and what doesn't. So it kind of makes perfect sense. But the point, I suppose, as a new professional or a more junior person would be trying to make a conscious effort to determine what workplace fit actually means. That might actually help you to find job satisfaction earlier on in your career. So if you go to another level, the more senior you are, the more likely it is that you think that your colleagues and your team are important to your job satisfaction. So more junior people are less likely to say that people they work with are important to job satisfaction. They might think that tasks, what they've been asked to do, salary, general sense of company culture are important, or they could be focused on personal career progression and getting the right experience. So it's a more challenging thing to really focus on that at an earlier stage. We found that the right team fit is critical to job satisfaction, and as we found in the first report, the wrong team fit can really hinder productivity, which I'll mention in a moment actually. So as a professional, by overlooking the working team culture when assessing fit, you could actually be holding back your own career success and your own career progression. As an employer, you've got to be aware of the characteristics of your current team and ensure that you hire new people who've got the same attributes so that the new people fit in with the existing team. Okay, so how does all of that actually tie together with happiness? So I'll add that onto the same diagram, and as you can see here, happiness is more common to people at more senior levels. So 58% of directors and C-level people saying that they're happy in their role, and that compares to only 50% at a junior to mid-level. Now you could kind of be cynical about that and say, well, just by being the boss you're happier because you get to tell people what to do, as opposed to being on the receiving end. But in my experience, the bad news is that everybody's got a boss no matter what level you're at, in one way or in another, and that could be even the customers tend to turn into the boss eventually. So I like to think that these three things are connected, and I could summarize it by saying the more experience that you've got at work, the more you realize that the people that you work with are essential to your happiness. You also become more aware of the kind of people that you want to work with, and if you can crack those two things, then it's far more likely that you're actually going to be happy at work. Still kind of on the same point, like workplace happiness is best achieved when you value the relationships that you've got at work, and that typically means you've found your fit. My takeaway here is that there's a large group of professionals who are not happy, and I would ask, are they not interacting well or getting on well with their manager or colleagues, or are they not putting enough value or effort into building relationships to help achieve the happiness? You know, like by not factoring in how people impact your happiness, is that a root cause as to why so many people don't really think that they fit in with their current role? So kind of returning to the initial slide in this section, my question is, are we learning this too late? You know, like if I think back to my early career, I think I might have prioritized the job title or career opportunity over having a team that I really fitted in with or a very supportive manager. Now, I was lucky in time, I suppose like most people in time, you still find those elements, but it wasn't really through a planned approach. And I would say for job seekers, I would encourage you to look at what makes you happiest at work and try and prioritize that, because that will definitely make you more successful at work and more effective at work. For employers, I would keep this trend in mind when you're hiring and developing staff. I hear a lot about employers struggling to retain junior staff and mid-level employees, and I think this kind of shows that you have to look a little bit beyond just the job tasks and ask how can you report or support employee happiness, because happier employees are obviously less likely to leave, which we know. Just one final point here. I think if you're a HR professional, you're looking at this from a HR perspective, and you wanted to flag the importance of this message to senior leadership in your organization, I think this might be a good way of doing it. So we said, let's try and make it all about money and see if that hits home. So we asked what the average cost of making a wrong hire was to the business. 30% of people who responded said that making a wrong hire costs more than $50,000, and actually 10% said it costs more than $100,000. Whatever it is in your own organization, there's definitely a cost. I think that is the language that I would recommend using when you're talking to the leadership of the team to get them to try and engage with this as a problem. And you've got to say, are your own hiring practices and your own retention practices contributing to that? You could also make it about productivity. We asked this question, well, a couple of questions here. How does making your own hire impact the team? 75% said that it decreased morale. 65% said it decreased productivity, and then 48% said that it increased inefficiencies. So it absolutely has an effect. It's nice to quantify it, I think. Okay, almost done. I'll just leave it a couple of recommendations. So I'll start with recommendations for employers or hiring managers. Number one, you've got to get the fundamentals right. So career progression and salary are absolutely key to being competitive in retention and in recruitment. Number two, conduct small health checks regularly to try and gauge the happiness of your own workforce. Like, you might think they're happy, but maybe they're not. So you need some way of doing that. It could be an employee survey, and it could be just simply by sitting down and asking the right questions. Three, change is key. What made someone happy when they took the role may not be what makes them happy today. So using questioning techniques to uncover potential reasons for dissatisfaction, and then being open-minded to introducing change would be a great idea. Then finally, get your staff involved in individual development plans. So try to look at what somebody's development needs are, getting it on the agenda, talking about it, and then trying to work proactively with them, get them involved in different things, which could be new projects, or get them involved in the, or exposed to the management team, presenting on new ideas, plans, asking their opinion, are all they seem simple. Sometimes they would be more complicated than you think. But involving people and including them has a huge effect. Then we've got recommendations for candidates. So we've got 3 things here. Number 1, do not undervalue your workplace satisfaction. Like, monetary gain is an immediate boost, but for sure it does not make people happy in the long term. The people that you work with will make you happy or not. If you are unhappy, I would always say, before looking elsewhere, talk to your manager. There could be things that they could do to address the issues that you have. Often it's poor communication actually is the problem as opposed to poor fit. So I'd encourage everybody to do that. And then finally, learning from your mistakes is one route to happiness, but being proactive and knowing what makes you happy, it could help expedite the process. I know that's difficult, but it could. Don't rely on trial and error. Try and bear in mind fit. Okay, that's pretty much it. There's just one little thing I'd highlight. This is in the first report. I think there's stuff in it about the second report as well. We want to try and say, okay, we've kind of highlighted the problem, but like, so what? Like, what do I do? So this is a kind of a little sneak peek into one section within the reports. So we've set up a few exercises that could help you go about defining the fit for yourself or for your team, and that could help you make better matches. On the screen here, this is one of the exercises that we've referred to as a health check. So just for information, I'll tell you the kind of thing you would expect to find in there. So step 1, you could define your own team's desired fit. So we've broken fit down into 4 different elements, which you can see in the first report. And there's some questions there and prompts that would help you be able to define your own fit and quantify it. Then step 2, using a questioning sequence that we have in the report that could help you find any potential issues within your team. So for example, asking people why they joined their last company and also asking them why they left their last company could give you an insight into what is important to that person. There might be stuff that you don't know about. And then finally, developing an action plan with that team member about how you can engage them, how you can include them and motivate them, where you could end up with a far happier person. And that is it. How did we do for time? I think we got it at just over 30 minutes exactly. Not bad. So we have some time for questions. I'll have a look in there. But in the meantime, while I'm just opening that up, you can now go to hayes.ca/fit, and you can request the first copy and the second copy, and we'll be in touch and get you that as fast as possible. If there's anything I can help you with personally, whether it's just talk about this kind of stuff or whether I can help you directly, whether it's recruitment or just talking about HR-related stuff, happy to do that. Drop me an email. It's rowan@hayes.com. And I think the @Canada must be something to do with Twitter, is it? So that's pretty much it. So we'll have a look to see if we've had any questions. I think we have, because I can see. So let's see. Right, so the first question we have, somebody says here, I'm in a new job and I'm realizing I'm not really a good fit. What can I do now without leaving? I'd like to stay at least a year. Okay, that is a very good question. How do you answer that? I would say the first thing is to say, you might be right. You know, like if you really are not a good fit and it's obvious to you and there's not much you can do about it, you know, don't prolong the agony, and maybe the right thing is to move. But having said that, I would, you know, if you look at what we just said in the report, the first question I would ask somebody about that is, are you trying to get involved, or are you kind of like the person at the school dance where you're standing at the side with your hands behind your back or your arms folded actually, complaining that nobody's dancing with you? You do have to get involved. You know, you join a new organization, people are comfortable already, you're the new guy, so you do have to make that effort. You've got to try and get to know people at their level, get involved. Like if people tend to go out after work to do stuff, then you should try and do that. There is an onus on people to try and build a relationship themselves, and it's amazing what can happen when you start building a relationship with people. Suddenly things work better, you feel more included, you start to feel like you belong, and as soon as that happens, then you are a fit and you have nothing to worry about. So I would say, can you honestly say that you're really making an effort, or are you kind of standing back going, when are people going to include me? I actually think they should make an effort to include you, by the way, but if they're not, it's worth investing in trying as opposed to just leaving. So hopefully that kind of answers that. Question somebody's, I think, literally just put into it. Maybe I should go from the top down. But anyway, so how would you know what the difference is between a bad fit for a role and the early day jitters and teething problems? Excellent. That's very similar to the first question, actually. And I would say when you go into a new company, I can't think of much that's more stressful. I think that feeling of being in a new company reminds you of the first day of going to school. You know, like you show up, and all the big kids are going around and they feel comfortable and they're having fun, and you don't know where anything is, you don't know where the washroom is or where to get a drink of water. So it's completely normal that you feel like that, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think being friendly, trying to instigate conversation with people, being involved with whatever is happening, if something is being organized by the company, do it. Be open, and you've got to get outside of your comfort zone at the start. I think if you're doing all of that and you feel nervous, you probably should feel nervous, but that's fine. If you've done that for a while and you're getting nothing back and people are just ignoring it, I'd then say the next step is to talk to your boss and say, how come I'm feeling like this? Like, what's happening? I think that's the answer to most problems. You've got to talk to your boss. If it's your boss that's the problem, then I think you've got another issue. And that maybe the answer there is to talk to somebody who could impact the decision. I always kind of say, talk to somebody who can help as opposed to complain. One thing I would advise not to do is don't start telling your colleagues that you don't feel like you fit in and you don't like it, because that will go straight back to somebody else. And it might offend people as well. Next question, how do you manage staff expectations when it comes to fit, especially with organizations in a constant period of change in today's market? So how do you manage staff expectations when it comes to fit, especially with organizations in a constant period of change? God, and it's saying that person asked the question previously, so how would you know to do, no, not that one. I'm not sure. I think maybe this is to do with, somebody else was actually asking me recently, with the workplace changing, or the workforce changing so fast, how do you keep up if fit keeps changing? Maybe that's what this question is referring to. I do wonder about that, actually, if the workforce really is changing that fast. Like, for a period of time, I was kind of subscribing to the idea that each generation was completely different. And the concept, I think the current one, is that millennials are significantly different from everybody else who's worked before. They're motivated by different things, different level of responsibility and work ethic. And we have discovered from doing some work and research on that they're not really that different at all. They are motivated by progression. They're motivated by responsibility. They're motivated by earning more money, getting promoted, moving up in an organization. Probably the biggest difference with those guys is they really expect communication at a different level. Like, they don't just expect to be told what's happening. They expect to be able to respond to that and say what they think about what's happening. Could be a bit of a difference. But I think the fundamental level of fit in an organization is actually very, very difficult to change. I know that, you know, if I look back at when I used to work for Hayes in a different country many years ago, I go back there 10 years later and the culture, organization setup is exactly the same. It feels exactly the same as it used to be. I think culture in a company is very difficult to change. So I'm not sure whether, maybe I'm not answering that question correctly, but I'm not sure that fit changes that much as to, actually maybe you want to change what your fit is because your fit doesn't work, but I think organization's culture doesn't change that quickly. Do you have any advice on how to hire the right people in an organization that is trying to change its culture, and on retaining the right people during the transition? Yes, I think that is an extremely difficult thing to do, but it makes sense. I think what you're talking about there is trying to have a defined, desired culture and then saying we want to change our culture from A to B. So we want to get people who are more like B to help us kind of get there. That makes sense with one exception, which is if you think about an organization as a person, and you think about a new person joining the organization as an organ transplant, if you like, it's very common that when you put a new organ into a person that you get what do they say, the body rejects the organ. So if things are the way they are and you've got 100 people who are like that and you add the new person who's not like that, it's very normal that that person will get rejected and they will leave. I think the first thing, if you're trying to change your culture, it's better to define what it is, what it needs to be, explain that to the team. But you want to be pretty sure that a good proportion of the team currently wants the culture to change and they have the right attitude, and then you can start setting about getting there. If there's too many people in the organization who are against any kind of cultural change, then they will stop it. And maybe the right thing to do would be to exit those people out of the organization first and then work on building the culture back up again. And I have seen that happen a couple of times. I've been involved with that as well myself. Questions are, there's loads of questions. Sorry if I've missed your question because I'm kind of at the bottom, I can't get up to the top. Are organizations assessing fit through psychometric tests? And if yes, what is the success rate? Honestly, psychometric tests seem to be something that goes in waves. You know, they become popular, people start using them, then they get confused as to what the point is, and are they really using them religiously? Does the psychometric test make the decision, or is it meant to support the decision? If you fail or you're ruled out, it's really, really difficult. I think the ideal way to do it is that you can survey your own employees, come up with a good psychometric test like McQuaig or something that does match pretty closely. You need some flexibility to it, so as you're hiring, if people have to do the test, then everybody has to do the test. If you're a clear match, that's a hire. The hiring manager can go ahead. It doesn't mean that they have to hire the guy, but it means that they could hire him. You could have a close match where you can say, yes, you can go ahead and hire this person if you want, but he comes with a health warning. But if you're going to use psychometric testing, there must be a line drawn where you say, if they're this far away from the match, you cannot proceed. I think that's the only way to do it. If you do it any other way, then it's a mess and a kind of a waste of time. But I believe in them, actually. I think they work very well if you're disciplined enough to use them. But I don't think it cracks the idea of fit, because if you could do that, fit is about how well you get on with people. It's like, do I like the guy that I work with? Do we have compatible personalities? And I don't think psychometric testing does that, because if it did, dating websites would have completely cracked it. You would just do a psychometric test, somebody else does one, match you, and you'd marry and live happily ever after, right? But it doesn't work like that. It's far more complicated. I think the only way really to assess fit is to get people together, get them out of the interview environment, and get them to spend some time with each other. So that could be come into the office and have a look around, you know, and somebody in the team is showing them around and chatting and see what they think. Take them out for lunch with a few of the team. If you're going, there's a company social event happening, that's a brilliant one to invite them to. You could just say, come into the office and spend a few hours. So like, just sit here and we can explain to you how our systems work and all that kind of stuff. It's really trying to get the interviewee out of interview mode and let's see what they're actually like. And do you and do your colleagues like the guy? Do you feel like there's a connection? Could you see you working with them? I think that's probably the most effective way of doing it. I would say the same thing if you're looking for a job, that you should try and see if you can instigate something like that. What happens if your boss is so bad? Oh, right, okay, joke question. I left my employer as I wasn't happy about a number of things. Any suggestion with respect to fit and happiness for my next job search? Okay, this is the last question, and I assume half the people have dropped off by now. But I would say in assessing happiness for your next job is exactly what I said. I think if you can figure out a way of spending some time with people that you're going to go and work with outside of the interview, so away from each side of the desk and talking about stuff, then you really should. And you could say, it is hard to instigate that, but you could do stuff like, hey, I'd really love to come into the office and like have a look around and like see what your systems are at and like talk to some people on the team. And I think if a company wants you on board, they will say yes to that. Like if they've got to the point where you're saying, let's offer this person, and you ask for that, it would be very unusual for them to say no. And actually, if they said no, I'd say that could be a cause for concern. And then you get to come in and like, you know, suddenly everybody relaxes, the interview's over, and you can get a sense of it. And I've seen people do that, or actually I've seen people join in their new job And the moment they get there, they get such a bad impression of the place. On the first day, they go, "Oh my God, I want to leave." But either it's too late, or you leave and it looks bad for you. But anyway, okay, God, loads of questions. I'm very sorry I didn't answer all of them. But if you want to drop me an email, I'm happy to continue on the dialogue afterwards. I hope you found it useful. I think by the sounds of it, most people did. And the third one is going to come out probably in 3 to 6 months from now, depending on what else we're doing at the time. So anybody who's requested a copy, anybody who's attended the webinars will be in touch with you, telling you when the third one is coming out. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time. Have a very pleasant rest of the day. Thank you.